She's the seamstress. She doesn't sit at the head of the table." The old woman heard it from the hallway. She had heard worse. She straightened the hem of her dress, the one she had made herself, the one with the tiny blue stitches along the collar that nobody noticed anymore. And she walked into the dining room and sat where they pointed. The corner, near the window, near the door to the kitchen. She folded her hands in her lap. She waited. She was still waiting when the lawyer arrived with the envelope. But before we get to what was inside that envelope, let me tell you about the woman they put in the corner. Because this story doesn't start at a dinner table in Houston. It starts 26 years ago in a one-room apartment in the 3rd Ward with a girl who was 19 years old and had nothing but a sewing machine and her mother's instructions. Before I tell you what happened next, if you love stories where quiet people finally get loud, hit that subscribe button right now. What comes at the end of this story is going to stay with you. Her name was Amara Sefa. She was born in Kumasi, Ghana, the 3rd daughter of a seamstress, who was the daughter of a seamstress. Her grandmother had learned to sew in the colonial school, the one the British ran, the one that taught Ghanaian girls to hem trousers for other Pavi's husbands, and her grandmother had taken that skill and turned it into something the British never intended. She turned it into independence. Amara's mother, Abena, had a saying she stitched into a piece of cloth that hung above the sewing machine. It said in Twi, "Onipa na ohye, onipa ho." A person is what makes another person. She said it meant that no one builds themselves alone, that every person standing tall is standing on someone else's hands. Amara came to Houston at 19 on a student visa. She enrolled at Houston Community College to study fashion design. She had $340 in cash, a used Singer sewing machine she had bought from a woman in Kumasi for the equivalent of $8 American, and the name and phone number of a woman named Mrs. Theodora Asante, a distant relation from her father's side who lived in the 3rd Ward, and who had agreed reluctantly to let Amara sleep on her sofa until she found her footing. She found her footing in 6 weeks. She found a job cleaning hotel rooms near the Galleria. She found a second job hemming trousers and letting out waistbands for a dry cleaner on Almeida Road. She paid Mrs. Asante $40 a month and never asked for anything she hadn't earned. She was 19 and she did not complain. That was the first thing people noticed about Amara Sefa. She did not complain. She just worked. The Mensahs found her through Mrs. Asante. Kofi Mensah was Ghanaian, 51 years old, and he had built a construction company in Houston over 25 years, starting with a pickup truck, a level, and a willingness to work 18-hour days in Texas heat. He was a serious man, a quiet man, the kind of man who measured things twice, cut once, and never raised his voice because he had learned early that the loudest man in the room was rarely the most dangerous one. He had a daughter. Her name was Ya. She was 7 years old, and she had not spoken in 4 months, not since her mother died. Kofi's first wife, Efua, had died of a brain aneurysm on a Tuesday morning in March. She had been making her daughter's hair. One moment she was there, the next she was on the floor. Ya had been standing in front of her. Ya had seen it happen. The child who had been talkative, bright, the kind of girl who asked the same question 6 different ways until she understood the answer. That child went quiet the Tuesday morning her mother fell, and she had not come back. Kofi's sister came to stay for a month. Then she had to go back to Dallas. Then a neighbor came in the mornings. Then a series of babysitters who left, one after another, because Ya would not speak, would not eat, would only sit at the window and look at the street. And some people do not know what to do with a child whose grief is bigger than their ability to manage it. Mrs. Asante told Kofi about Amara. She said, "She is a young woman, but she is not a young girl. There is a difference. You will see." Amara came on a Wednesday morning. She knocked on the door of the Mensa house in Pearland, a solid brick house, a big yard, a porch, with 2 chairs nobody sat in anymore. And Kofi opened the door and looked at her. She was 20 years old by then. Small, careful, the kind of person who takes up exactly the space she is given, and nothing more. "You are the one who sews," Kofi said. "Among other things. She won't talk, my daughter. She hasn't spoken since March." Amara nodded. She didn't say, "I know how to fix that." She didn't say, "I have experience with grief." She said, "Can I see her?" Ya was in her room, sitting on her bed, looking at her hands. Amara walked in, sat down on the floor, not next to the girl, not too close, and took a piece of green fabric from her bag. She began to sew, just sewing, quietly, not looking at Ya, not talking to Ya, just doing the thing her hands knew how to do. Ya looked at her for 7 minutes before she spoke. "What are you making?" "I don't know yet," Amara said. "Sometimes you have to start before you know what it's going to be." Ya watched her hands. "My mama sewed." "I know. She made me a dress for Easter." "What color?" "Yellow. With white buttons. Yellow is a brave color. You have to be brave to wear yellow." Ya almost smiled. "Almost. I'm Amara. I'm Ya." Kofi hired her that afternoon. What Amara became in that house is the same thing she had always been. A woman who showed up every day and did the next necessary thing. She fed Ya breakfast. She walked her to school. She picked her up. She helped with homework, sitting beside the girl for an hour every afternoon at the kitchen table, not doing the work for her, just being there, the same way her grandmother had sat beside her when she was small and struggling, and the night felt very long. She learned that Ya ate exactly half her food when she was sad, and all of it when she felt safe. She learned that the girl hummed when she was happy. A little tuneless hum, barely audible, like a bird testing whether it was safe to sing. She learned that Ya had a habit of straightening things. Books, pencils, the salt and pepper shakers. When the world felt crooked, Ya made small things straight. Amara noticed all of it. She wrote none of it down. It lived in her hands, the way her mother's patterns lived in her hands. Some knowledge is not written. It is just known. She also sewed. She sewed in the evenings, after Ya was asleep, at the kitchen table with a lamp and her old singer that Kofi had let her set up in the corner. She made curtains for Ya's room, deep orange, with a border of small diamond shapes that Ya had chosen from a swatch book. She mended Kofi's shirts. She let out the waistband of his suit trousers without being asked, because she had seen him struggle with the button on a Sunday morning, and she understood that some pride is too heavy for a person to ask for help with. He didn't say anything when he found the trousers, neatly pressed. The button moved a half-inch. He wore them to church. He stood a little straighter. He thanked her in the kitchen afterward. "How did you know?" "I didn't know anything. I just looked." Kofi looked at this woman, 20 years old, small, quiet, her hands always busy. And he saw his own mother in her, not the face, the quality, the particular kind of person who gives without calculating the return. He gave her a raise without being asked. She put it in a savings account and didn't touch it. Ya started talking again, not all at once. It came back the way spring comes back. Not on a single day, but in small accumulations. A sentence here, a question there. Then one afternoon in October, Amara was sewing at the kitchen table, and Ya came downstairs and sat across from her, and talked for 45 minutes without stopping. She talked about her mother. She talked about the yellow dress. She talked about a dream she had where her mother was standing at the stove, and the kitchen smelled like Contamire stew, and she had called out, and her mother had turned around and smiled and said, "I'm just cooking. You can go back to sleep." Ya had told no one about that dream for 6 months. She told Amara. "I think she was saying she's okay," Amara said. "Do you really think so?" "I think the people who love us most find ways to tell us what we need to hear." even after. Ya thought about this for a long time. I'm glad you're here, she said. So am I. If you know someone in your life who has sat with you in your silence the way Amara sat with Ya, not fixing, just staying, tell them today. Some people carry others without being asked, and they deserve to be seen. Now let me keep going, because this story is not over. Not even close. 6 years passed. Ya grew. Kofi's company grew. Amara stayed. She stayed because Ya needed her. And then she stayed because the house needed her. And then she stayed because it had simply become the place her life happened. Her savings grew. She took community college classes at night. Business, design, accounting. She had an idea for a tailoring business. She wrote the business plan in a notebook she kept in the drawer beside the singer. She told no one. Kofi knew. He didn't say he knew. But one evening, he came down for water and saw the notebook on the table, open to a page of numbers and projections. And he looked at it for a long moment and then got his water and went back upstairs. The next morning, there was a book on the kitchen counter. Small Business Development in Texas. A practical guide. No note, no inscription, just the book. Amara put it in her drawer with the notebook. When Ya was 13, Kofi got sick. Not seriously at first. Fatigue, a cough he couldn't shake, headaches that came in the afternoon and stayed through dinner. Then more seriously, stage 3 lung cancer, diagnosed in November. He had not smoked a day in his life, and the doctor said it didn't matter. And Kofi sat in the car in the hospital parking lot for 23 minutes before he started the engine. He came home and told Amara before he told anyone else. He sat at the kitchen table. She poured him tea without being asked. How long? She said. They don't know. Could be 2 years. Could be 5. With treatment, maybe more. Amara put her hands flat on the table. Okay? I mean, we keep going. You fight it, I'm here. We keep going. He looked at her for a long time. You don't have to stay. I know. She stayed. She drove him to chemotherapy. She managed the house. She helped Ya understand what was happening in the language a 13-year-old can hold, truthfully, but without devastation. She made Kantomeyer stew when the chemo made everything else taste wrong, because it was the one thing Kofi could eat without the metallic overlay. And she made it twice a week without being asked and left it on the stove in a covered pot. And sometimes he ate it at midnight when the house was quiet and he couldn't sleep. She learned his silences. When he was in pain, he went very still, the way a person goes still when they are trying not to give anything away. When he was afraid, he cleaned things, the kitchen counter, the garage, his desk, as if order was the only thing he could control. When he was having a good day, he hummed, a low, tuneless hum, barely audible, the same hum as Ya's. She had never noticed it before. Now she noticed. Your daughter hums like you, she said one afternoon. He looked up from his newspaper. Her mother said the same thing. It's a good thing to pass on. He smiled. A small smile, the kind a man keeps mostly to himself. Amara, I want to tell you something. Tell me. I've been thinking about the future, about what I want to leave behind, not just for Ya, for everyone who made this house what it is. You don't have to think about that yet. I want to think about it now, while I can think clearly. He folded his hands on the table. I have a meeting with my lawyer next week. I want you to know before I go. She looked at him. I'm leaving something for you. In the will, Kofi, I don't need. It's not about need. It's about truth. And the truth is that this house has been a home because of you, not because of the walls or the money or anything I built, because of you. And I want that truth to be on paper, official, so that when I'm gone and everyone is in a room together, they will know it, and there will be nothing left to argue about. Amara was quiet for a moment. They will argue let them. He looked at her steadily. Let them. He died 2 years later, on a Saturday morning in April, peacefully, in his own bed, with Ya holding one hand and the window open because he had asked for fresh air. Amara was in the kitchen making tea. She knew. She knew the way you know certain things, not because anyone tells you, but because the house changes when the person who filled it is gone. It gets very quiet in a specific way. The quiet has a different weight. She heard Ya's voice, a single word, Daddy. She put the kettle down. She stood in the kitchen doorway. She did not go in. She let Ya have that moment. Some grief belongs to itself and not to anyone else. She made tea anyway. She set it on the counter. She sat down at the kitchen table and waited. Ya came out eventually. She was 21 years old, and she looked like her father. And she walked into the kitchen and sat down across from Amara and didn't say anything. Amara didn't say anything either. They sat in the silence that belonged to both of them, the silence of a house where someone is present and then not present, the peculiar rupture of that. Finally, Ya said, "He's gone. I know. He's really gone. Yes." Ya put her head down on her arms on the kitchen table. She cried. Amara reached across and put her hand on Ya's back and didn't move it until the crying was done. The funeral was held at St. Francis Episcopal Church in Pearland. 240 guests. Kofi Mensah had built things in this city, buildings, contracts, relationships, and all of it showed up on a Saturday in dark clothes with flowers and condolences. Ya had planned everything. She was competent, precise, her father's daughter. She arranged the seating, the speakers, the reception. She was 21, and she arranged a funeral with the focus of a woman twice her age, and Amara watched her and felt, alongside grief, something that was close to pride. Then Kofi's family arrived from Dallas. His brother, Bernard, and Bernard's wife, Stella. Bernard was the older brother, the one who had stayed in Dallas while Kofi came to Houston and built everything. They had not been close. Bernard had opinions about how Kofi ran his business, his household, his life, and he had shared these opinions freely for 25 years without being asked. He had not visited while Kofi was sick. He had called once. Kofi had told Amara about the call without saying much about it, which told her everything. Stella was the kind of woman who took inventory of a room the moment she entered it. Price, brand, positioning. She assessed the Pearland house in 45 seconds and recalibrated her posture accordingly. She looked at Amara and asked, "Ya, who is that?" "That's Amara. She's family. The housekeeper." Ya's jaw tightened. "I said she's family." Stella nodded the way people nod when they've decided to table an argument for later. At the reception, Stella approached Amara near the kitchen, where Amara was quietly replenishing the serving trays. "You've been here how long?" 14 years, Amara said. 14 years. Stella repeated it with a particular tone, the tone of someone doing arithmetic. "And you'll be going back to Ghana now, I suppose, or staying in Houston. Either way." Amara looked at her steadily. "Either way what?" "Now that Kofi's gone, the household situation will need to be reassessed. It's a family matter now, the house, the estate. Bernard is the eldest. He'll be involved in decisions." "I see," Amara said. "Of course, we appreciate everything you've done." Kofi was. Stella searched for the word. "Sentimental, about people. It's a quality. But estates have to be managed practically." "Of course," Amara said. She went back to replenishing the serving trays. She said nothing else. She finished what she was doing, washed her hands, and went to sit with Ya. The lawyer's name was Winston Darko. He had been Kofi's lawyer for 12 years, and he was a compact, serious man who did not perform gravity because he didn't have to. He came to the house 4 days after the funeral. He sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where Kofi had made tea and told Amara about the will, and he opened his briefcase with the particular care of a man who knows what he's carrying. Bernard and Stella sat on one side of the table. Ya sat on the other. Amara sat beside Ya because Ya had asked her to, and Stella had pressed her lips together and not said anything about it. Winston set the documents on the table. "Before I begin," he said, "I want to say that I reviewed this will with Mr. Mensah 4 times over the course of 2 years. He was fully lucid for each review. He made deliberate, considered choices. If anyone has questions about the process, I am prepared to answer them." Bernard nodded. Stella folded her hands. Winston read. "The company went into a trust managed jointly by Ya and Kofi's longtime business partner, James Osei, with profits split between ongoing operations and a construction scholarship fund for first-generation African-American students in Houston." Bernard shifted in his seat. The Pearland house went to Ya outright. Stella's hands tightened. Winston continued reading. "To Amara Sefa, who came to this house as a young woman of 20 years old and who did not leave for 14 years. I leave the sum of $300,000 to be used as she sees fit. I also leave her the Singer sewing machine that she brought with her when she came, which I should have told her years ago she could always take, and the small business plan she has been writing in the blue notebook since 2019, which I believe is ready and has always been ready." I asked Winston to also include this letter in the reading of the will, to be read aloud. Bernard opened his mouth. Winston looked at him. Bernard closed his mouth. Winston unfolded a separate letter. He held it in both hands and read, "Amara, when you came to my house in 2010, my daughter was 7 years old, and she had not spoken in 4 months. You sat on the floor of her room and sewed a piece of green fabric and waited. You didn't try to fix her. You just stayed. She spoke after 7 minutes. I timed it because I was standing in the hallway watching through the door, and I couldn't breathe. You stayed for 14 years. You walked my daughter to school. You mended my shirts without being asked. You moved the button on my suit trousers and never said a word about it, and I wore those trousers to church, and I stood up straighter in them, and nobody knew why except you and me. You drove me to chemotherapy on 17 separate occasions. You made Contamire stew twice a week for 2 years so I had something I could eat, and you left it on the stove in a covered pot, without making it a thing, without making me feel like a man who needed to be taken care of, which is the greatest kindness anyone did for me in those 2 years. You sat with my daughter in her grief the first time, and you sat with her in mine, and I do not have the right language for what that is. I am not sure English has the word. In Twi we say, obi firi obi ho. One person comes from another. You are part of where Ya comes from. You are part of who she is. And I want that said. Officially. Out loud. In a room. So there is no question. I know some people at this table will not be happy with these arrangements. I know some people will call it excessive, sentimental, unfair. Let them. A man who watched someone keep his child alive for 14 years and said nothing is not a man I want to be at the end. You told me once that your mother stitched a saying above her sewing machine. Onipa na ohye onipa ho. A person is what makes another person. You made my daughter. You made this house. I am saying it here, in the only document that cannot be ignored, because I should have said it every day and I didn't, and this is what I have left. You are not the seamstress. You are not the house capper. You are not the help. You are the reason this family still has a shape." Winston folded the letter. The room was very still. Ya had both hands pressed flat on the table, the way her father used to sit when he was trying to hold himself together. She was not crying yet. She was past the place where crying happens, in the deeper place where things simply become true. Bernard said, "This is irregular." Winston said, "It is completely legal. The will was witnessed, notarized, and filed 8 months before Mr. Mensah's death. Everything is in order. $300,000 to Amara Sefa," Winston said. He said the name the way a person says a name when they want you to hear it as a name. Yes. Stella had not spoken. She was looking at the table. Ya looked at her uncle. Her father's face, slightly rearranged. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "My father moved the button on his own suit trousers once. I watched him try for 10 minutes. He couldn't do it. He didn't ask anyone for help. He put the trousers back in the closet and wore a different pair." She paused. "He only asked for help from someone he trusted completely. And the day I saw him wearing those trousers again, the ones with the moved button, pressed and clean, I knew. I was 13. I knew who this house was because of." She looked at Amara. Amara looked back at her. Ya said, "She's been family for 14 years. We're just making it official." Bernard stood up. He said something about lawyers and contestation. Winston let him talk. When he finished, Winston said, "You're welcome to consult your own counsel. The will is airtight." He began to put the documents back in his briefcase with the same careful movements as before. "Mr. Mensah anticipated this response. He told me to tell you. And I'm reading from my notes here that if Bernard wants to argue about it, he should have come to visit while there was still time to have the argument in person." Bernard left. Stella followed. The door closed. Winston finished packing his briefcase. He stood. He shook Ya's hand, and then he shook Amara's hand and held it a moment longer than a handshake requires. "He talked about you every time I saw him," he said. "Every single time." He left. The kitchen was quiet. The same kitchen where Amara had sewed at night while Ya slept. The same table where Kofi had told her about the cancer. The same window. The same light. The afternoon settling into the room the way it always had. Ya said, "Are you okay?" Amara looked at the table. She thought about a one-room apartment in the 3rd Ward. A sofa in Mrs. Asante's house. A girl with $340 and a used sewing machine and instructions her mother had given her that she had never stopped following. "I don't know yet," she said. Ya laughed, small, surprised, the laugh that comes when something true gets said at the wrong moment. He would have liked that answer. He would have written it down somewhere. He was like that. "I know." Ya reached across that table and took Amara's hand, the same hand that had been on her back when she was 7 years old and couldn't speak, the same hand that had been on her father's when he was afraid. She held it the way her father had held his best tools, carefully, with knowledge of what it had built. In the months that followed, Amara opened the business she had been writing toward for 6 years. She called it Sefa and Daughter. The daughter and homage to Ya, but also to her own mother, Abena, and to the grandmother who had learned to sew in a colonial school and turned it into freedom. She rented a small space on Almeida Road, a few blocks from the dry cleaner, where she had once hemmed other people's trousers. She brought the singer. The business did well. Word spread the way. Word spreads in a community where people remember the woman who showed up, stayed, and never asked for credit. She brought Ya on as a partner 18 months later. Ya was finishing her business degree by then, and she walked in one afternoon and said, "I want to help build this." And Amara said, "Then get an apron. We start with the books." Bernard called once. To apologize, or something close to it. He said he had been wrong to be how he was. He said Kofi had always been the better of them. Amara thanked him for calling. She meant it. Stella never called. That was fine. On the 1-year anniversary of Kofi's death, Ya came to the shop on Almeida Road. She brought Contomeyer stew in a covered pot. She set it on the counter. She sat down. "He would have been proud of this," she said, looking around at the bolts of fabric, the machines, the measuring tape hung on a peg by the door. "I think so. He was proud of you long before this," he told me. "When I was maybe 15, he said. "Ya, do you know what a person looks like who never does anything for recognition?" I said no. He said, "You do. She makes your curtains." Amara looked at the window. The curtains in her shop were orange, with a border of small diamond shapes. She had made them herself. "Your father was a man who noticed things," she said. "He learned it from someone." They ate the stew. The shop smelled like home. Not any specific home, the home that lives inside the work your hands have always known, the home that cannot be taken away because it is not in a building or a savings account or even in another person. It is in what you are, in what you keep doing, even when nobody is watching. Onipana o onipaho. A person is what makes another person. Abena had stitched it above a sewing machine in Kumasi. Amara had carried it in her hands across an ocean. And now it was in the curtains, in the stew, in the girl who had not spoken for 4 months, and was now running a business and saying her father's name out loud without her voice breaking. That is what the seamstress left behind, not because she was owed it, not because she asked, but because the truth has a way of outlasting the people who try to fold it up and put it in a corner. She didn't sit in the corner. She had never sat in the corner. She had only ever been put there. And there is a difference. The difference is what the dead know when they pick up a pen. Now tell us, is there someone who showed up for you, who moved quietly through your hardest years and never asked you to notice? Maybe it's time to say their name out loud. Drop it in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from today. And if this story stayed with you, hit subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.